Welcome back for another week, everybody. I want to talk mostly in this video about the reading I had given you for homework, the banking concept of education. But I want to say something first about assignments that are due and that are being assigned. Um, on Monday, we have the descriptive assignment due. I will post the place for you to submit that descriptive assignment. You can find the instructions for that under the assignment sheets tab on Moodle there. If you haven't started that yet, you can probably do this very quickly. If you're watching this on Monday and you haven't maybe started it yet, you can probably do it pretty fast and still get it in on time. So I would do that. That's the descriptive assignment. I'm also assigning another small writing assignment that's going to be due the last day of the semester. This one, I'm calling it a picture prompt. It asks you to select a picture that is important to you and kind of tell the story of how it came about. You can look at it as kind of, similar to what we did with like the narrative essay, kind of in terms of like telling a story of how a picture came together. If you're using some kind of like family picture, I've had people do like graduation pictures or stuff like that. You can kind of tell the story of where it was and who was there and the setting and give us a lot of details and stuff. I've also had people do like pictures of their pets and tell a story of like either going to get their pet or some kind of thing that they did with them or whatever. But anyway, that just asks you to pick a picture and kind of tell the story of it. And again, that's also a small writing assignment, not a formal essay. You don't need an intro conclusion, more of just a writing exercise. So that's going to be due at the end of the semester. And I know I talked about this in my last video, so I won't say too much. But I will have posted by Monday the assignment sheet for the argument essay, which is our third and final big essay. I'm not going to say too much, I talked about it last time, but your options here, I've given two options. We're making an argument, obviously. It's going to require a lot of research, so I would try to get started on this as soon as you can. And basically the two options are related to I'm framing both of them in terms of solving problems, right? I wanted to make this essay about arguing for a solution to a problem. I've got to be very specific both about what the problem is and what the solution is. So the two options I'm giving you are to write about something related to college, any kind of problem about college. I'm going to have an assignment and a discussion for you this week about student loans and tuition and stuff. That's something that always comes up. And then obviously the essay I'm going to look at today had to do with teaching and teaching styles and philosophy of teaching. Because that's another one that always comes up is a problem with college is, professors. I'm well aware of that. So there's those things. And then the other option is to solve a problem that relates to coronavirus. I wanted to keep this stuff, real world, very real to our life. So it didn't feel like, it's bullshit or something. So next week I'll have some readings for you about COVID, both in terms of like the economy and like the straight up health kind of stuff. Okay, so that's what I'll say about that. And of course that's also due at the very end of the semester, like I said before. Okay, and with that, let's get into the banking concept of education. So like I said, the reason I'm having us look at this is that I view this essay as dealing with something that we're looking into, a problem with college, right? Teaching, styles of teaching and stuff like that. Students will always tell me when I ask them about things that are problems with college, things they don't like about college. A big one that always comes up is having, the professor who just puts up a PowerPoint or, just like tells you the notes, and then there's a test and you have to regurgitate the notes, right? And that's kind of the same problem that Paulo Freire is taking up in this essay. So that's the reason I wanted to read this. But also, we could look at this essay as kind of doing, in a way, the thing that I'm asking you to do, at least in that it starts off by identifying a problem, right? What's the problem? The banking concept of education. Freire sees this as very bad. He doesn't like it. He thinks it's a very big problem. Goes so far as to say it's dehumanizing and that it serves the interests of the oppressors, right? We'll look at that in a second. And then by the end of the essay, he offers his own solution, which is problem-posing education. And that's the style that he thinks is better, right? So it also kind of is an example for us in terms of identifying a problem, arguing for a solution. But let's get into what he actually says in this essay. I know this essay is difficult. Don't be worried if this was hard to understand. It's definitely a difficult essay, for sure. So I'm going to try to clear it up a little bit. So first of all, what does he mean by banking concept of education? I think there's a couple quotes we can look at on the first page here. So for instance, in like the third paragraph, talking about banking concept of education, he says, the student records, memorizes, and repeats these phrases without perceiving what they really mean. So I think it's that experience that we've all had, records, memorizes, and repeats. You know, like I can remember, psychology classes, economics classes, classes of all kinds, math, history, where it's PowerPoint on the thing, you're at your desk. Oh wait, professor, as a teacher, can you go back to the last one and finish writing? Right? Or that's the whole class. It's just everyone furiously scribbling in their notebooks, right? And there's always that one person who asks them to go back to the previous slide, Um, yeah, so that's kind of what he's describing here. He calls it the banking concept. Why does he call it this specifically? Because he's using kind of a metaphor of that this kind of teaching of with the the notes and the nothing else that this is like depositing into a bank. That basically teachers who teach this way, they're taking their the stuff about history or whatever, and they're trying to deposit it to the student. The same way that you would you'd give your money to the person at the bank, and then you'd be putting it in your account, right? So he says that teachers who teach this way, the kind of underlying philosophy of teaching here is that you are depositing knowledge into the students, who are themselves empty receptacles who can do nothing more but receive the knowledge that you give to them. You know, I don't think students like this. Number one, the first thing we can say about it is and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or better than me, but I don't think students like this very much. I don't think it's very interesting to them. Yes, he says it turns the students into containers, into receptacles to be filled by the teacher. So that's what he's talking about by the banking concept of education. And it's like, I don't know, what percentage of your teachers have taught like this, do you think? Like, is it more than half? Is it 80%? Is it 30%? I don't know. I try very hard not to teach this way. I will say that the online format has, been a big problem for me as far as this goes, and I probably have fallen into doing more banking concept teaching than I normally would. I try to avoid it very heavily, but it's been tough this semester. So I do apologize, if I'm sounding like a hypocrite, saying that this is bad to do, because I do agree with Freire, when I probably have done some of this myself this semester, but normally I try very hard not to do this. He goes on to say, this is the banking concept of education, in which the scope of action allowed to the students only extends only as far as receiving, filing, and storing the deposits. So I think we get what he means by banking concept of education, right? I'll just give you a couple more. He gives this list on the second page, right? He says, these are all characteristics of the banking concept. The teacher teaches, the students are taught, the teacher knows everything, the students know nothing. Going on down to it, the teacher is the subject of the learning process while the students are mere objects. The teacher acts and the students have the illusion of acting. So yeah, I think that fills out this picture even more. I think that one part he says the students are mere objects. I think that is kind of anticipating what he's going to say about it being dehumanizing, which is I think kind of a big claim and a provocative claim that I want to get into in a little bit. Okay, so all these, the list that he has here of all the characteristics of the banking concept of education. He says the following attitudes and practices, which is the list, the following attitudes and practices which mirror oppressive society as a whole. He says that this way of teaching mirrors oppressive society as a whole. What does that mean? I think it's that, like, okay, an oppressive society, what would that mean? It would be one where you're not allowed to have whatever your own like free thoughts and things, where you're expected to just do whatever authority tells you, where you're expected to follow rules and be on time and not question your supervisor. And it's I think maybe this is a cliche thing to say at this point, but I think it's the way that school more than anything else maybe turns us into efficient and cooperative workers, right? Where that the way that you sit at your desk and do what the teacher says mirrors the way that you sit at your desk, maybe cubicle. People don't really do cubicles though. I think we're back to desks. You sit at your desk and you do what your boss says, and if you question the teacher, just like if you question your boss, it's a dangerous thing to do because there could be consequences, depending on the kind of thing. But so he says this it mirrors oppressive society as a whole. So he sees this style of teaching, which again is probably the majority of teachers that we've had, probably the majority that I had, at least before I got to college anyway. The majority way of teaching reinforces kind of the same things as like an oppressive society. And I think this is why I think one of my questions to you was how does it serve the interests of the oppressors I think that's what he's saying here is, obviously if it is doing the oppressing, if school is also oppressive, then it goes hand in hand with a society that is very hierarchical, where authority has all the money and stuff as well, right? And if you're a lowly worker just trying to get by in the world, you don't have, you're not, you can't really do much more in these settings than just listen to what you're told. And then if people become used to that, if people come used to just kind of accepting authority and just doing what they're told and going along with it, that can have political consequences and everything else. So I think that's kind of what he's getting into here. Uh, he says the more students work at storing the deposits entrusted to them, the less they develop the critical consciousness which would result from their intervention in the world as transformers of that world. The more completely they accept the passive role imposed on them, the more they tend to adapt to the world as it is and to the fragmented view of reality deposited in them. So I think that's the connection between, because he's only talking about school, right? So it seems kind of ridiculous to say, oh, well, you're saying a kind of teaching is related to, having like a fucked up society as a whole and a bad political system and stuff. And he says yes, because it teaches kids from a young age that your place in the world is not to transform it. Your place in the world is not to look at what it is and try to make it better. Your place in the world is to look what it is and find out how you fit into that, right? And find out the way that you can go along and keep your mouth shut and just, get your small paycheck and pay the bills and never save anything and just keep all the cogs turning, right? So yes, he says basically that kind of teaching makes people passive. It makes them not view themselves as transformers in the world. And in that way, it benefits the oppressors, as in the people who are already on top in society, the richest people. Like Jeff Bezos benefits from us being told that we can't transform the world, that we must just adapt to it how it is. And he thinks, and I think rightly, maybe, I don't know, you could disagree, but I think he pinpoints that, like, the location of this, where people are first kind of taught these things, that you're supposed to be passive, that you can't really change anything, that it comes from, like the second grade classroom, and all the way up through the education system. He goes on to say, the interests of the oppressors lie in changing the consciousness of the oppressed, not the situation which oppresses them. And I think this is what he thinks this kind of teaching does, is that it teaches you that, like, if there's any problems that you see with the world, well, it's really your problem. It's really that, whatever, you have ADHD or something. Not that ADHD is not real, not, plenty of people have it, sure. But, like, I think it's also sometimes, in certain cases, kids being like, yeah, school is boring as hell, like it is dumb for us to just sit here and listen to what the teacher's saying. Like, maybe it should be more interactive, but instead people say, oh, well, you must have a problem, must be something wrong with your brain or whatever, right? So yeah, he says that they would rather change your consciousness than the situation that makes you feel this way. Just to give a couple more quotes here, the banking approach to education, for example, will never propose to students that they critically consider reality. And that's the same point, right? Where you don't view yourself as being able to transform the world. Instead, you must adapt to the world. So this is all, these first, 3, 4, maybe even 5 or 6 pages are him explaining the problem, right? And then we get into his solution. For our essays, I would say that you probably should start by explaining what the problem is and why it's so bad, whatever thing you want to write about. But I would make sure that your main focus is on your solution, maybe a little more than Freire's is in this essay. Okay, so what's his solution? His solution, he calls, looking at page 6 here, problem-posing education, right? He talks about this as the action and reflection of men and women upon their world in order to transform it. So again, everything that the banking concept denies to students, he thinks problem-posing allows them. That because we're posing things as a problem and kind of trying to figure out together how to fix it, that it then encourages students to think this way about the world in general, right? And that when they see things wrong in the world, they're more likely to be problem solvers about it. They're more likely to say, well, how can we fix this and make it better? Not just how do I find my way into this so I don't cause any trouble, Some of the phrases he uses here to describe this, I think, are really good. He says, so he emphasizes a lot, he emphasizes dialogue, he emphasizes collaboration, right, as kind of the fundamental things about this kind of teaching. where the teacher is no longer the center of knowledge, but instead the teacher is kind of just presenting what the problem is, right? It's like, hey, here's a problem. How should we fix this? And then the students, the teachers, all talking together to try to figure it out, and see what the best stuff is, and working together, students working together, the teacher working with them. And he talks about this. He says, through dialogue, the teacher of the students and the students of the teacher cease to exist, and a new term emerges. Teacher student with student teachers. So, like, I think that gives us a good idea of what he's talking about here. That you don't just have teachers and students, you have teacher students and student teachers, right? So that it's not the case that it's one, the teacher just telling the students. It's kind of knowledge going all over the place, right? Circulating throughout the classroom. Like students bringing up new ideas, the teacher responding to that, the teacher suggesting something, students responding to that, and just kind of like going back and forth, right? Another term he uses here, he says the students, no longer docile listeners, are now critical co-investigators in dialogue with the teacher. I think that's really good. Critical co-investigators, right? So I think about this like when I teach composition 2, which I do teach here at Bergen, I believe that I am teaching next semester. So if you are taking composition 2 and you're looking for a teacher, and maybe you like some of the stuff we did this semester, you can find my class there. But when I teach that class, it's a lot about literature, right? It's about short stories and drama, reading plays and stuff. So when we do that, we'll read a short story, and I'll try to be like, okay, here's the short story. What do we all think of this? And of course, I have, my opinions and whatever, but critical co-investigators, right? That there's this object, in this case, a short story or something like that, and that we are all going to try to figure out what's going on here. That it's not that I'm going to tell you what's happening here and then you'll write it down and remember it. It's that we're all trying to figure this out, right? Like, what's going on? I don't know. I have some ideas. What do you guys think? So this is problem posing education. This is what he thinks the solution is. Oh, I wanted to go back to the idea of the banking concept as dehumanizing, because that seems like a big claim, right? To say it's treating people like they're not humans. And I think it's because for Freire, he has a very specific idea of like what it means to be human, right? He talks about, our ontological vocation, and that's a fancy way of saying it. Basically, what that means is like he thinks that to be fully human, you must view yourself as being able to be like an active participant and transformer of the world. That basically, if the position that you're being asked to take on is to just listen and remember and regurgitate stuff, that's really not human in a fundamental way. That's what that's what a tape recorder is for, And if you think about it, like in these classes where it's just a PowerPoint the whole time and all that, if you replace the students with robots, if you replace the students with statues, would the class be fundamentally different? Like, would it look any different? It would still be the people in their seats, the one person in the front of the room talking and gesturing and all that. Nothing would change really, right? Because there's no collaboration, there's no dialogue between students and teachers there. So that's why he says it's dehumanizing. I think he has a point there. You could disagree, but I think he's onto something. Let me see. Anything else I want to get here? Okay. In problem posing, just some more quotes to help us understand what he means by problem posing education. In problem posing education, people develop their power to perceive critically the way they exist in the world with which and in which they find themselves. So he's really trying to break down this thing where in banking concept, you're just kind of a passive observer of all these things outside of you, and all you can do is write down and just notice them or whatever. He's really trying to emphasize that in this problem posing approach to education, that it encourages people again to be actively transforming things, to see what's going on in the world and be like, oh, this could be changed. Oh, why is it like that? We could probably make it better, right? So that's why I think he sees the classroom as kind of I don't know, like a kind of breeding ground for how people are going to behave politically later on. And that's why he sees these things in terms of dehumanization and oppressors and all of that kind of stuff. Let me see here. I think that is kind of all the quotes I wanted to get from Freire. His writing's confusing, but I think if you have like an open mind while reading it and don't get too hung up on the vocab, I think it's kind of amazing too. So yeah, that's his solution. And he thinks that it has these far-reaching consequences beyond the classroom. to have students and teachers working together, right? Where the teacher is not the sole location of knowledge, where everyone's encouraged to like try out different ideas and try out different solutions. He thinks that this could have a larger impact on society and the way people think about the world in terms of politics and economics and things like this. So I think this is a great essay. I tend to agree with Freire. I really, take this seriously and try to base my own teaching off of it. Again, probably not very successful this semester, unfortunately. Apologize about for that. But yeah, this is so. If you wanted to write about this, right? If bad professors is a problem that you'd be interested in writing about, I think this essay could definitely work into that. And again, I think it also shows us the style of like explaining what the problem is and then offering a solution. Okay, well, that's all for now. More videos coming later. See you.